This happened when I was 18. I'm 22 now and living in San Antonio, Texas. It all unfolded during my senior year of high school when COVID-19 had just started disrupting life. Schools shut down and so did most of the world. Despite the lockdown and quarantine orders, my friends and I bizarrely ended up going out more than ever. With most non-essential businesses closed, there wasn't much to do, except for one thing that I've always loved: urban exploration, especially searching for haunted spots. It's a passion that has stayed with me to this day. I don't scare easily. I've had my fair share of unsettling encounters with homelessness, cults, and even once stared down the barrel of a gun. But none of those experiences came close to the inexplicable and eerie event I encountered during this particular outing. At the time, I had just started talking to a classmate named Clarissa. Although we were early in our relationship, we got along well and she agreed to go along with one of my nighttime adventures. If Clarissa hadn't been there to back up my story that night, I'm confident no one would believe me. The idea was mine. We'd explore a wooded natural area early in the morning, at 3 a.m. to be exact, which seemed thrilling at the time. The place is called O.P. Schnabel Park, a mostly safe and scenic spot by day, but it takes on a very different energy after dark. It's not without a dark history either. In 2016, a 24-year-old woman named Lauren Bump was tragically murdered there, stabbed over 20 times, and in 2021, a young man was shot while exploring the woods. Police are known to patrol the area after sunset to keep people out. Still, we decided to go. When we pulled into the parking lot around 3 a.m., it was pitch dark. The dense treetops blocked out most of the moonlight, creating an unsettling atmosphere. I dislike using flashlights during these excursions because the beam limits visibility due to its narrow range and can also attract attention from afar, so I let my eyes adjust to the darkness as we moved through the park. We walked about 15 or 20 minutes along the main trail. The night felt heavy, quiet in an unnatural way. My plan was to take a shortcut via an off-road trail that would loop us back to where my truck was parked, sparing us the need to backtrack along the main path. Clarissa agreed and we turned onto the narrower, more secluded trail. We had only been walking for 2 or 3 minutes when we both froze in our tracks. A sound pierced the silence, someone playing a flute, clear and melodic, carrying through the cold night air. At first, I simply stood there, listening. It sounded surprisingly rhythmic, like an actual musical composition. But there was no time to appreciate any musicality. It was deeply unsettling. The music shouldn't have been there. There shouldn't have been anyone there. While I was still trying to process it all, I noticed Clarissa trembling next to me, her fear palpable. She was on the verge of tears and began muttering prayers asking God for forgiveness and protection. This snapped me out of my initial stupor. I took in our surroundings. It was hard to determine where exactly the sound was coming from since it seemed to echo among the trees. If I had to guess, it was coming from somewhere near the main trail we had left behind, separated from us by about 30 to 50 yards of dense woods. What's worse is that the music seemed to be getting closer with each passing second until it felt like it was practically on top of us. In an effort to calm both myself and Clarissa, I told her not to worry, that nothing bad was going to happen, and decided we needed to act instead of standing frozen in terror. I grabbed her hand and said we should run down the trail towards where my truck was parked. Without hesitation, we sprinted into the darkness. I think the flute stopped playing at some point as we ran, but I couldn't be sure because adrenaline took over and drowned out almost everything else. We hadn't gone far, maybe 30 feet at most, when an entirely new terror seized us. Out of nowhere, we heard heavy rustling in the bushes, accompanied by the crunching sound of twigs snapping underweight. Then something big bolted across the trail directly in front of us. To this day, I have no idea what it was, perhaps a deer or some other large animal, but at that moment it could have been anything. Whatever it was moved fast and vanished before I could fully register its shape or size. Only its presence lingered, cutting through me like static electricity buzzing through the damp night air. What followed was pure instinct. Fight or flight. I could almost sense the presence of something massive in front of us, though I couldn't say for sure whether it was the wind or something else that gave me that feeling. Oddly, I didn't see any silhouette or shape, nor did I hear it approach or retreat. The only sound was when the entity dashed right in front of us. It was sudden and alarming. As soon as we felt and heard this strange, swift movement, we instinctively turned around and sprinted in the opposite direction until we reached the spot where we originally heard the flute. Strangely, as if someone had been waiting for us to return, the flute began playing again. This time it was much louder and seemed to surround us entirely. The melody carried a chime-like quality, reminiscent of an Irish jig, yet its cadence remained hauntingly steady. What made things even more unnerving was the impossibility of pinpointing where exactly the sound was coming from. It was as if the music enveloped us from all directions. At this point, my fight-or-flight instincts kicked into high gear. We felt trapped. We could either go back to the off-road trail where the mysterious dash had occurred, far scarier because of its darkness and dense forests, or continue along the main trail, where the eerie flute player seemed to be waiting for us. Since the main trail was at least paved with cement, I decided it was the lesser of two evils and told Clarissa, who was trembling with fear, "Let's start running toward the truck." Adrenaline carried us as we turned our usual 20-minute walk into a quick 7 or 8-minute jog. Somewhere along the way the flute stopped playing. During the run back, we passed a random porta-potty placed near the path. It sent chills down my spine. I couldn't help but imagine someone lurking behind it or hiding inside. Thankfully, there was no evidence of anyone there, or anywhere near the area for that matter. My truck was still the only vehicle parked by the main entrance to the woods. Once we reached safety, I jumped into the driver's seat and sped away. The next day, I told all my friends what had happened and spent hours scouring the internet for similar experiences. Some people shared tales of encountering ghosts, cults, or animals that made terrifying sounds, but a soft and rhythmic flute melody? I couldn't find anything resembling our bizarre encounter, though perhaps I didn't dig deep enough. Despite my efforts to rationalize what happened that night, it didn't make sense, especially given that the nearest neighborhood was miles away. Even if someone had been playing a flute from there, it would have been impossible for the sound to carry so clearly deep into the woods at 3 a.m. No matter how vividly I replay these events in my mind, I never found out who was playing that flute or what dashed across our path. Reflecting on it now gives me chills. It feels distinctly paranormal rather than something rooted in tangible reality. Was it a person? A ghost? A cult? I don't know. All I know is that I've avoided going back to those woods at night ever since. I've explored plenty of unsettling places since then, but I've never experienced anything even remotely similar. For some context about me, I'm a 20-year-old guy who works as a pharmacy technician at a medium-sized hospital in northwest Alabama. My shifts run from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m., and I'm also tasked with stocking surgery rooms during my schedule. I work 7 days straight, followed by 7 days off. A setup that makes the workweek challenging but leaves plenty of time for recovery during my off days. My workweek runs Thursday through Wednesday. On one particular Tuesday night, my 6th consecutive night of work, I headed out early to stay with my wife at her aunt's house about 30 minutes away from our own home. She'd been babysitting her little cousins while her aunt and uncle were on a trip and had been feeling uneasy due to the house's lack of curtains, which left her exposed in an unfamiliar environment at night. Initially, I didn't stay with her because it didn't seem worth arriving at 5 a.m., only to leave shortly after for another shift. But on this night, against my usual routine, I made an exception. Just as the sun began to rise, she would normally drift off to sleep. However, on her final night babysitting, she felt intensely anxious. When she told me about it, I decided to come over. Although she was stubborn and insisted she was fine, she admitted feeling much better once I arrived. For me, working the night shift for the past 2 years had already taken a mental toll, and I suspect I've started developing mild insomnia. When I got to my wife's aunt's house, I found myself unable to sleep, which wasn't new, but this time was different. I had never stayed awake for more than 28 hours straight before, and even if I wanted to, there was no time to rest because we had an incredibly hectic day ahead. We had to drop her little cousins off at school, attend a friend's gender reveal party, do grocery shopping since there was nothing in the house. She had been away for 3 days, and I still had a shift at work starting at 6 p.m. that evening. By the time we were driving around, I managed to sneak in less than 10 minutes of sleep in the car. The overwhelming wave of exhaustion was hitting me hard, but I powered through by grabbing a huge Red Bull and another energy drink when I got to work. Since my car's brakes needed fixing and neither of us trusted me to drive her car after being awake for over 24 hours, my wife ended up driving me to work and picking me up later. It was now Wednesday night, and I had been awake since around 2 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. My shift started out fine. As long as I kept myself busy, I could hold off getting completely consumed by fatigue. I put in my earbuds and focused on my task, stocking medications in the Omnicell machines in the surgery rooms. It was a quiet weeknight, with a few late surgeries wrapping up and housekeeping cleaning operating rooms that had been used earlier. It wasn't unusual for surgical staff to walk in while I was there to grab supplies for their procedures. Typically, I would glance over my shoulder and give them a friendly smile. They'd usually smile back. That night was different though. As I stood in one of the rooms stocking meds and zoning out to my music, I heard the high-pitched squeal of a door opening behind me, the unmistakable sound of a door that desperately needed oiling. A second later, the heavy wooden door slammed shut with a loud crash. Startled, I instinctively turned around to see who'd entered, only there was no one there. I brushed it off initially, thinking that maybe whoever opened the door had seen me inside and decided to check a different room instead. Shrugging it off as no big deal, I continued with my task. Then I moved on to the next room. This one was dark when I arrived. As I opened the door and peeked in, I swear I saw someone crouched near the Omnicell machine rummaging through the sharps bin, the container used to safely discard used needles and vials. My immediate thought was that someone was digging for something like morphine. After all, someone had been caught doing exactly that in the past and subsequently fired. I quickly flicked on the light, prepared to confront them, but when the room lit up, there was no one there. Now I was officially creeped out. I wasn't sure how long someone had to stay awake without sleep before they started hallucinating, but I rationalized that this might just be all in my head. Still, it made me uneasy. I shook it off, took a deep breath, and finished stocking the surgery rooms without further incident before heading back down to the pharmacy. At 2 a.m., like clockwork every night, our job is to deliver patient-specific medications to various nurses' stations throughout the hospital. To give you some context about how things are organized, let's consider the 5th floor as an example. Each floor has 3 elevators in the middle of the space. If you exit the elevator and turn left, you'll find 2 sections, 5,100 and 5,200. If you turn right from the elevator, you'll reach the 5,400 and 5,500 sections. These 4 sections are further divided into 2 wings each, so on one side of the floor, you'd have patient rooms numbered 5101 to 5115 in one wing and 5201 to 5215 in the other. On the other side are rooms 5401 to 5415 in one wing and 5501 to 5515 in the other. To make things easier going forward, I'll refer to these sections simply. During hospital remodeling, the overflow area was stationed on the 3rd floor to accommodate patients from the 54-55 side of the 5th floor. That section of the hospital was temporarily emptied for renovations, and since patient numbers were low that night, the area remained eerily vacant. My job involved delivering medications to nurses' stations floor by floor, and eventually I reached the 5th floor. After completing my delivery to the 51-52 side, I decided to check on the renovation progress in the deserted 54-55 area. As I entered, an unsettling sense washed over me. The long, empty hallways stretched ahead, devoid of nurses or patients. Though I was accustomed to the normally abandoned surgery rooms on other floors, seeing empty patient rooms added a chilling feeling I couldn't shake. As I walked down the desolate corridor of the 55 side, a faint rattling noise caught my attention near room 5512, as though one of the hospital beds was moving. I cautiously peered into the room and froze. The sight before me was horrifying. Inside was an old man, violently shaking as though seizing. Blood flowed from his eyes, nose and mouth, while grotesque gargling sounds filled the air, eerily similar to those made by zombies in TV shows like The Walking Dead. His monitor emitted frenzied beeping, signaling his critical state. My heart sank as I tried to jump into action. However, when I re-entered the room after stepping momentarily behind the door frame, it was as if he had vanished into thin air. The bed was clean and neatly made, and the monitor silent and powered down. There were no traces that suggested anyone had occupied the room for an extended time. Confused and shaken, I began questioning whether exhaustion had caused me to hallucinate. Determined to escape this unsettling atmosphere, I rushed toward the elevator and made my way back down to the pharmacy on the 1st floor. As soon as the elevator doors opened, a security guard stepped inside, a man sporting a hospital badge and shirt who bore an uncanny resemblance to the very individual I had just seen upstairs moments ago. He offered me a friendly smile and patted my shoulder as he passed me on his way up. Stunned, I watched as the numbers climbed to the 5th floor. When the elevator returned without me calling for it, I braced myself for what might emerge, but this time it was empty. Panicked and disoriented, I retreated to the pharmacy and remained seated until my wife came to pick me up at the end of my shift. While waiting for her arrival out of curiosity or desperation, I Googled how long it takes for sleep deprivation to cause hallucinations, and discovered that symptoms typically manifest somewhere between 30 and 48 hours of sleeplessness. At that moment, I realized I had been awake for 38 hours. Exhaustion seemed like a plausible explanation for what I witnessed. But when I stepped outside toward my wife's car, the same ominous feeling returned. Glancing back at the 5th floor window of the hospital wing above the pharmacy's location, there he was, the old man gazing intently down at me from behind the glass. My body flooded with chills as I hurried into her car without saying a word about my experience. It's been nearly 2 weeks since that night. While I haven't seen him again, I can't shake the memory. It's perplexing why my mind, or whatever it was, fabricated this specific man in such vivid detail, especially since he holds no significance in my life. Whether a product of exhaustion-induced hallucination or something unexplainably real, it felt undeniably authentic in those moments. On a completely different note about my living arrangements, I currently reside with my boyfriend in his home, a modest but appealing single-story residence with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a basement. Though comparatively smaller than other homes in our upscale neighborhood, it's highly desirable due to its location within a quiet block that offers much privacy thanks to its curving layout. With low violent crime rates and an overall peaceful environment, it feels like an ideal place for us to live comfortably without needing to break into multi-million-dollar territory. As 51, 52, 54, and 55. Outside my house, there isn't a single neighboring home directly facing us. In total, there are 8 houses on our block, and further down there's a small wooded area. Last October, while my boyfriend Ma was away in Vegas for a bachelor party, I found myself alone from Thursday through Monday. On Friday night after work, I invited some girlfriends over for a wine evening. While we were sitting in the living room watching scary movies, the doorbell suddenly rang. The sound startled us and we exchanged uneasy glances. It felt eerily timed and almost unreal, given what we were watching. Curious but cautious, I tried to peek outside to see who was at the door. Unfortunately, I couldn't spot anyone from the window. The door has a small glass panel near the top, so I peered through it instead, but no one was there on the porch. Oddly, I noticed 4 cars parked in the driveway. It was clear people knew someone was home. Despite this, we chalked it up to an unfortunately timed prank or perhaps kids playing ding-dong ditch. After my friends left later that night, it was already late enough for me to head straight to bed and fall asleep. But not even an hour later, I was jolted awake. The doorbell rang again, twice this time. Groggy and disoriented, I checked my phone. It was 1 a.m. Anxiety crept in. No one has legitimate reasons to be outside your door at that hour. Panicking a little, I called my boyfriend in Vegas, even though I knew he'd likely be partying. Sure enough, he answered, sounding heavily drunk amidst the loud noise of a bar. He had to step into a bathroom to properly hear me. Concerned, he told me to stay put in the bedroom and not open the door under any circumstances. Oddly enough, he didn't suggest calling the police, so for now I held off on doing so. I hung up and tried convincing myself to calm down and sleep again. Just as my nerves started to settle and my heart rate slowed, I heard an unnerving clicking sound outside my window. Then came a series of knocks followed by a male voice saying, "Hey, anyone home? I need some help out here." Thank God the blinds were drawn. I couldn't see who was outside, nor could they see me. Hoping he'd leave soon, I remained silent, but he knocked again. This time he said something chilling, "I know you're home." That was enough to push me over the edge. I called the police immediately. I whispered during the entire call, terrified that this person might somehow hear me. Though others might find my reaction overly dramatic, in that moment I was genuinely frightened for my safety and wanted help fast. Within 10 minutes, there was another knock at the door, this time accompanied by someone ringing the bell again. A voice announced, "It's the police." Nervously, I approached the door and looked out through the tiny panel to confirm it was indeed 2 officers standing outside. When I opened the door, however, something unexpected happened. The taller officer immediately stepped inside without waiting for explicit permission. He bluntly stated that they were responding to my report of a disturbance. As I described the situation, a man lurking around ringing my doorbell and knocking on my window, the officer interrupted me multiple times with dismissive comments. His demeanor felt arrogant and domineering. He told me to shush on several occasions and repeatedly talked over me when I tried explaining further details. Meanwhile, his partner stood quietly in the background without saying a word throughout the entire interaction. What bothered me most was how dismissive the taller officer seemed about my fear. He appeared skeptical and uninterested in taking my claims seriously. When asking for specific details about the man outside, he ignored my earlier explanation that I hadn't actually seen him. This led him to remark, "Well, you're the one who called us, ma'am. If you don't want our help, we can leave." That comment left me stunned. Never having called the police before, I wasn't prepared for such unprofessional behavior from someone tasked with The police came back to the door and told me there wasn't much they could do since I didn't have any cameras or proof of the man attempting anything suspicious. After that, they left. I didn't feel any safer, other than maybe the fact that whoever that man was now knew I had called the authorities. I went back to bed and thankfully the next time I woke up, sunlight was creeping through the closed blinds. It was around 10 a.m. and a Saturday. My friend was hosting a Halloween party later that evening, and I had planned to help set up. During the day, I did some grocery shopping and picked up a few items for the party while I was out. My costume for the night was Velma from Scooby-Doo, while my friend hosting the party was going as Daphne. I got to her house around 6 p.m., and since the party started at 9, there was plenty of time to help her prepare. By 10:30 the party was in full swing. I stayed pretty late, probably until a little after 1 a.m., but I hadn't had much to drink aside from a couple of beers, so I felt fine to drive home. When I got back to my house, the first thing I noticed was a cool draft. After placing my things on the dining room table, I realized one of the windows was wide open. Confused, I went over to shut it, trying to remember if or why I might have opened it earlier. Nothing was coming to mind. Brushing it off for the moment, I headed to the bathroom to brush my teeth, but when I came out, I noticed the basement door was wide open. I froze. That's when I started to hear this strange, faint clicking sound coming from down in the basement. My pulse quickened as I moved toward the basement stairs. The closer I got, the more clearly I could tell that whatever it was coming from down there. When I stopped at the top of the staircase and looked into the pitch-black void below, the clicking suddenly stopped, and that's when a voice spoke from the darkness. Asterisk, you're finally home. Asterisk. I slammed the basement door shut and bolted outside with my phone in hand. Shaking with adrenaline, I pounded on my neighbor's door until he answered. Once inside his house, I called the police while trying to keep myself together. When help finally arrived, it ended up being the same two officers who had come earlier in the week. This time, my neighbor came with me as we talked to them, and surprisingly, it seemed to make a difference. The taller officer, who had been dismissive during their first visit, was noticeably less rude this time. The officers did a thorough search of my house while my neighbor and I stayed safely in the living room. When they finished their initial sweep, I showed them all the spots where someone could possibly hide, just to be sure. We practically tore through every corner of the house, but no one was there anymore. To calm my nerves, I called my drunk boyfriend while starting to absolutely lose it emotionally. Once I was somewhat convinced that whoever had been there earlier was gone, I packed an overnight bag and decided to stay with my sister until my boyfriend came back home. This time, before leaving the house, I checked every single window and made sure they were all securely locked. The biggest takeaway from what happened is this. If you have windows that can open wide enough for someone to crawl through, always make sure they are locked when closed. Even though we still live in this house today, it took me months before I could stand being alone here for any significant length of time. Even now, I occasionally have nightmares about that night, dreams where I think I hear tapping on the window only to wake up in a panic. It's something I'll probably carry with me for a long time. Protecting others. Feeling demoralized yet desperate for assistance, I apologized and reiterated that I was scared. After some back and forth, the officers finally agreed to check around the property with their flashlights. They completed a lap around the house, but honestly, their search felt perfunctory at best, not thorough by any stretch of the imagination. I remained inside watching them from afar through various windows as they inspected. Recently, though, there had been some renovations happening on the 5th floor, especially in sections 54 and 55. Things were slowly starting to feel off.